Welcome to Secular Soup. I'm Amy with a Y.
And I'm Amy with an I.
And we're just two blueberries floating in a bowl of tomato soup. Stay tuned for real talk about atheism, feminism, politics, parenting, and whatever the fuck else we want to talk about because this is our show. And get ready for a whole lot of motherfucking profanity. Buckle up, bitches. It's time to have some soup. Episode 7. I tried to change it up a little there. Did you notice? Try to do different.
I wasn't listening to you.
Of course
I zoned
not.
out.
You're such a bitch.
I know.
So we have a real treat for our listeners this evening. We have a guest who, for the three of you that listened to my old podcast, Heathen Hot Dish, you will know this fellow. His name is Justin. Say hi, Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Thank you.
No, I'm honored. I don't think I've ever been a treat before.
That's you haven't. So, yeah. I know your wife. I'm just saying.
I can go to my grave happy now. I've done it all.
Yeah. So for Graham out there listening, because I think Graham is a listener. Hi, Graham. He was our only listener on our other show, I think, or the only one we ever heard from.
Sure, you bet.
Remember Graham?
Hi, Graham.
Graham's
so nice
bomb.
to talk to you again.
Okay. So what we are doing, the reason that we have invited a cis white man on our show, which is not protocol for Secular Soup.
No.
I apologize for both my gender and my orientation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We needed
We'll
to hear
just get that
that
out of the way right up front.
Okay, thanks. We are going to do an episode all about leaving religion and kind of changing your entire worldview. And my story is really boring. So we needed to bring someone on who actually had an interesting leaving religion story in addition to Amy with an I. Because Amy with an I has a pretty good story. Mine's lame. So I invited Justin on because his is pretty epic. And I am devoting this episode to my good friend Cheryl because she's the one that asked for this topic. And she is lovely. So
shout out to Cheryl. I know
Thank
Cheryl
you,
as
Cheryl.
well.
Justin knows Cheryl. Justin's
I don't know Cheryl.
You don't, but
nice to meet you, Cheryl.
You would love
she's a
Cheryl.
lovely person.
Cheryl and Justin's wife and I, the three of us, are the unholy trinity. So
You're goddamn
that's
right.
just a name we give ourselves when we go do things and stuff.
Well,
Anyway.
was it 2 years ago we did the Halloween party where we were
Mm-hmm.
my wife was a nun. I was the Pope. And you were
I think I
you
was
a witch?
I think I was the queen that time. Zombie queen. I don't remember.
Okay.
I do have a really good picture of you two kissing, though, which is great because it's the
so
Pope and a nun.
sacrilegious.
So, and I still
That's
have
funny.
the big Pope cross thing you made down in my office here. So
I was
You
I was
should
pretty
have
proud
worn
of
it on
myself
our
for that.
YouTube
lives
show.
on. Well, you can't really wear it. It's
Oh,
I think
you
we
have
can
to
get the
have-
pictures
thing,
for
you have
that
to
still. Maybe
hold it.
upload it.
Okay.
That'll be a treat for everyone. So, Amy with an I is a former Mormon or a foreman,
I am.
as I like to call them, and Justin is a former Seventh-day Adventist. So I'm going to
Wow.
let you two fist fight and decide who wants to go first
Well,
with
he's
your
the
story.
guest, so he can go first, and then we can kick him off the
Aw,
line and talk about
so
it.
nice of you.
Well, that
Yeah,
sounds
Good
lovely.
idea. I hadn't
Thank you.
thought about that.
And then not lovely at the end because that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And then he'll have to wait until we release the episode to hear about it. So
I mean, he can stay on if he wants, like the guest that stays with the animals on the end of the show.
yeah, but he's got to be quiet and sit in the
Yeah,
corner and feel bad about
I'll be
himself.
like the one on the old Johnny Carson show that sits further
Yeah,
down
that's
the
what
couch.
I'm saying. They move
Yep.
over and the koala's there, and they're like, I guess I'll hold the koala.
Just sit there and look like a
mean-
moron.
Mm-hmm. They're like, slide over. Jack Hamill's here. What?
Oh my god!
As long as I get to pet a tiger, I don't care.
We'll see what we can do. We don't have that much
Okay.
Patreon money yet. I don't know how much tigers
Yeah,
cost.
sorry.
So
I thought you were killing it. I heard the podcasting industry
Oh,
is
we
where to
are.
go make all the money.
we are
Oh, yeah.
killing it, but we're not
Okay.
killing it to cognitive dissonance levels yet. Although we will be within 2 episodes. So-
Easy.
Did you say
It's easy.
cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know what
You've
that
never
means.
heard of it. It's stupid. Don't look it up. It's just
Well, it
two
reminded me of a
fucking
show
white
I
guys.
heard of with Cecil and Tom, these two nut jobs
No,
on there. I don't know if
no.
that... No? Totally different deal?
Totally different
Okay. Yeah,
deal. I
I
don't
was
know.
way off.
I don't know any
You're
Tom or
thinking-
Cecil.
No.
I apologize.
We don't talk about those names on this podcast, Justin. And if I had
Oh.
known that you were going to blaspheme this way,
We're mere
maybe I would
moments
have
in,
rethought my invitation.
and I've dropped the ball.
We're not
already.
having a man on the show again. Thanks.
You ruined it.
Ruined it for everybody.
You ruined it for everybody.
Did I ruin it?
You need,
or did
now
I
you
just...
need to write notes to every man on the planet apologizing.
I'm sorry.
And you need to apologize
That doesn't
to
count.
Chris, because that means Chris never gets to come on our show now, even though he had us on his show. So sorry, Chris. It's Justin's
Especially
fault.
Chris.
Yep.
It's my fault. I'll bear the brunt of the burden.
So Justin, since you're our white male guest, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of your story, your origin story? What's your deal?
Well, it's kind of funny because I've let's see, what has it been? I'm 43 right now, and it was right around. Boy, it's been almost 10 years. It's hard to believe that, but life was challenging for me, and I came from a kind of an interesting place. Was raised by a single mother. My father pretty much left right as I was born, basically. But my mother ended up diving really deep into the faith that she was raised in, which is Seventh-day Adventism, just to kind of shorten the beginning of the story a little bit. But it's a super conservative, at least our variant. I think most strains of Seventh-day Adventism are pretty conservative, but we were in a fairly affluent neighborhood down in the Twin Cities, Minnesota area, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, suburb on the west side of the town, which is called Minnetonka. And it's very affluent. We went to a church that my grandparents went to. And so having, my mother be a single mother, divorced, I mean, it was a really big kind of stain on their reputation. And we as kids, even, we knew it then, that we were kind of, mistake. We were a little bit of a stain on the reputation, and there was a stigma around kind of our whole presence there. We always kind of felt like charity cases and kind of a failure of the faith type of deal, but it really kind of shaped who we were. Kind of felt like there's a persecution complex that came right out of the gate, which is really strong with Seventh-day Adventism to begin with, because they're big on end times prophecy and persecution and suffering for your faith. And I heard Ryan Bell. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I know, Amy, you've heard of Ryan Bell, but he's a former Seventh-day Adventist pastor who left the faith. And I talked to him one time.
He did the Year of Atheism,
Year Without
didn't he?
God. Yep.
The Year Without God, yeah.
And
he's great.
to my knowledge, he never went back. So
No. Why would you?
yeah, but he made me, he familiarized me with a term called Seventh-day Sadventists, which I had never heard before, but man, did it ring true, because it's really a morbid, at its core, it's a morbid, fatalistic kind of worldview, because you expect the worst to happen. The better person you are, the more you walk the path of God, the more you can expect to be persecuted and
tested and trials. And
exactly. Yeah.
That sounds shockingly familiar.
Yeah, it's really gross. I was thinking about it today.
Yeah.
I mean, it really kind of messed with my emotional state today, just thinking about it, because I'm pretty far removed from thinking about faith and these kind of matters in going back. So it was kind of interesting to start kind of rehashing some of these things and realizing, just like now, that it's been almost 10 years. But I backslid. I ended up leaving the world with my mother. She ended up getting remarried when I was about 12 or 13 years old. We had lived all around the Twin Cities area. We were pretty poverty level. We were on welfare, powdered milk and government cheese, all that stuff is kind of how I remember growing up. But she met a friend of hers, had a brother who was single and lived out in California, and he came out, and they ended up dating for a week, and they got engaged. And he left and went back to California, and they had a correspondence to the dating, and they were both Seventh-day Adventists, and that's when they really doubled down on their faith.
Wow.
We ended up buying a school bus, emptying all the seats out of it, packing all of our stuff in that school bus, and we drove to San Bernardino, California, and my mom married a guy that she had known for a week. Whoa. And that was kind of a real good example of how faith empowered our family to make these just insane leaps of, this seems like to any rational person would be a terrible idea to make a move like this, but we prayed about it.
Yeah.
And,
well, yeah, you pray.
Right. The story of Gideon, you put the fleece out, and in the morning, if it's wet, that's or the ground is dry around it or whatever, and the fleece is dry, whatever. It's a lot of symbolism and things that we would do that were absolutely reckless. I mean, for
Interesting.
yeah, just looking back, I mean, I could go for days on just foolish things that were done. Turns out
you can. We can cut you out of the show completely.
Yeah.
The magic of editing. Long story short,
I don't know how to edit. Don't worry.
Oh, she does. Okay. Never mind
sweet.
then. And I don't know any of it,
Nope.
so.
It's in there then. But the moral of the story is he was in my mom's fiance, new husband. He was a nice guy. They're still together. I mean, it worked out really well for them. So
That's lucky.
yeah,
Wow.
ultimately it's a success story, but he was a business owner who had experienced a lot of success. But when we moved out there, we found out he was destitute, and he was in the rears to the IRS in the 6-figure range. And
Oof.
we were all enamored by, the high lifestyle. We'd been living in low income housing in the cities and moved from apartment to apartment to apartment for my whole life around the cities. I mean, I couldn't even count how many different places we lived in, but it's in the dozens. I mean, by the time I was even in my early teen years when we moved to California,
Wow.
but basically ended up liquidating the property. And they ended up, and this is where another miracle came into play, where they were really torn. They found a buyer, miraculously, of course, that was able to pay cash and get them to where they could pay off the IRS, get the debt, and just start from scratch together. And they were, okay, well, we're going to have absolutely nothing, but we're going to be zeroed out and start afresh. And literally every single dollar they had, they went in. And this is how the story is told. I don't know the details because I was a child, but moral of the story is that they had a little money left over, and they were really conflicted. And this is where they had kind of a watershed moment to follow Christ or, take care of their family. And they decided with the little bit of money they had left was tithe that they should have paid
Oh my God.
on the sale of the home, which would have absolutely zeroed us out. And they paid it. So off the top of the sale of the house, everything, they paid the 10%, which completely put us upside down. And ended up moving back to Minnesota. And when they were dealing with, it was a different age back then where you didn't have the internet, you couldn't check accounts, whatever, but they got out to Minnesota with the help of my grandparents, came back, closing accounts and kind of just tying up the loose ends. Somehow they had found a bank account they had 2 bank accounts, whatever. Again, I don't remember the details. I was a kid, and this is all the way they like to tell the story now. The exact amount of money that they had paid in tithe miraculously existed in an account that they had forgot about. So
They would have had it doubled.
well, that would have been really impressive, and it would have helped us out a lot, but it was just enough for them to, but that was kind of a moment that really, really fired
That
them
faith
up.
affirming.
Yep. That emboldened them to go all the way in. And we ended up living around the Twin Cities area for a little bit, and then they had an opportunity to move down kind of out of the way. Went to private school for a little bit. I know I'm jumping all over the place here, but again, I could sit for days. But they ended up signing on with a group of what I call fanatics in a cult. I was already being homeschooled for about a year in the Twin Cities area, which was tolerable. I mean, there was at least people around and whatever, but they ended up moving to a place in Fountain City, Wisconsin, which is a tiny rural community down just inside the Wisconsin border on the Mississippi River, down the southeast corner of the state of Minnesota. And it was, I'm not kidding, out in the sticks, the most remote, isolated. It was a former Seventh Adventist school, camp, self-sustaining business. They had wood heat. They had a bakery where they made, home ground. They ground the wheat themselves, everything, and made these products that they would sell around the community at little co-ops and whatnot. And that's kind of how they sustained this now defunct Seventh Adventist school. So it was just a skeleton crew of people living there. It was myself, my younger brother, who was about 8. I think he's 8 years younger than I am. So he was quite young at the time. I think I was 13 then. And just lived in complete isolation, doing nothing but homeschooling, reading the Bible, And the whole mentality
Jeez.
then was that the Bible is the pinnacle of human knowledge. I mean, there is no higher authority. There's no more valuable guidelines for what to do in life, where to go, how to operate. Everything you need to know. I remember hearing them say, my grandparents, my mother, repeatedly saying, if you understand the Bible, read it completely and absorb it and get to a point where you can, demonstrate a command and knowledge of the Bible, you have the equivalent of a doctorate at any, Ivy League school. So that was impressed in me as a child that,
wow.
Yeah, it just set me up with just really faulty programming and unreasonable expectations of what to see in the world and what to do and how to react. So
it's a lot of pressure on a kid too. Just, I imagine there were probably times you wondered if you were doing things correctly or,
Oh, and that's where the Seventh-day Adventist comes in, because you know you are always going to come up short. It is impossible. And you know this, and yet your every fiber of your being is telling you to try harder or to at least repent and be, aware of your shortcomings and failures and to lean not on thine own understanding and, all those, the happy horse shit that goes along with it. But that isolation too, I mean, that really...
Yeah, that's probably part of the programming.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When you
so
have
why
no...
don't you...
Because it's just all inclusive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is the worst. I keep jumping in. We can't see each other. We're just doing audio Skype, so I'm a horrible interrupter. But why don't you, Justin, tell us kind of what brought you out of that and what started you down the path to the dark side, to the atheism.
And that's why I went back a little bit. I just wanted to...
Besides being evil. Inside.
I left my mother. I mean, we moved all over the country, went to Idaho, and they went back to California. And that's where I just kind of... We came to a head when I lived in Boise, Idaho. I was 14 years old. You get your driver's license out there at 14. I made a friend because I was desperate. Ooh. I went from, a couple years of homeschooling and complete isolation, being thrown into a high school, essentially. It was a massive school with over 2,500 kids in it. And I was out of my element. I mean, I was being tested on things like, I remember hearing the term Pangea and plate tectonics and all this, and my head just collapsed. I didn't know how to function. But I made a friend. He had just moved there, and he was kind of a troubled kid who had just left his father and was moving in with his mother. So we kind of had a little bit of connection there, but we ended up, we became attached at the hip. He was my survival mechanism. I just kind of clamped onto him.
That's good.
Yeah, it was great, except for he knew all the things that I didn't know about. And at 14, I started smoking, drinking, drugs, and that obviously didn't sit well with my mother. I started listening to the devil's rock and roll music. Just the other day, I was thinking about Guns N' Roses came on. I was talking to somebody about it, and I had a Guns N' Roses album under my mattress of my bed, and she found it, and it was The Appetite for Destruction. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's the shape of a cross with the 4 band members in skull caricature cartoons laid over the cross.
And that was right in the middle of that satanic scare.
It was at the end, but that was pumped into me. I mean, the backward masking, all that stuff. I mean, we listened to so many seminars about, secret hidden tracks of
I remember all of that too.
Follow Satan. And it was... So I had failed her at every level, and she completely shut me off to the point where she let me stay with the friend. And his mother completely supported our partying. She thought it was great. He had a car. We're 14 years old. We're drinking, doing drugs all weekend long. And then I would go home and just go to school, basically, and not communicate with my mother. And they ended up deciding to do another move. I mean, we had lived in 2 different places in Idaho in the year and a half we'd been there. 2 different towns, 2 different schools. And they said they were moving again. And I said, I'm not going. And she said, fine.
Wow.
You're going to stay here. And if you want to go anywhere, you're going to call your dad. They left. They moved to California. So I was 14 years old in Idaho waiting. And my dad sent me a plane ticket, and my dad and I didn't have a real good relationship either, but that's what brought me to Minnesota.
Wow.
And that's where things really went bad, because then
It really
get to
is.
this small, unnamed Minnesota town. And as Amy will vouch, this town has a good reputation for, at a minimum, for alcohol abuse. I mean,
come
that's a
on.
big
I don't know
part
what you're
of-
talking about.
Yeah, that's all.
That's all there is to do here.
Really, that's it.
Yeah. As a teenager, we have no like community centers or teen centers, or you're either
Alcohol
in varsity
or
sports or an alcoholic
sports.
or both. So I was not in sports. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, I made friends right away, but they were the wrong ones again. There wasn't an overabundance, looking back, of good friends, but I mean, I was at the point though where I knew my old life was no more, and I was just to the point where I didn't care. I was in such a survival mode of just latch onto someone that I could hang on to, and I did. I made friends with people just out of pure desperation, and I learned coping mechanisms just to survive, because I had changed school so many times and moved so many times that just having any kind of stability and connections was invaluable to me. I mean, I couldn't put a price on it, but I made good friends, but we did the wrong things. And long story short, I heavily abused alcohol and drugs and was arrested many times. Nothing serious, but I mean, I got a pretty ugly track record. And eventually what really kind of brought it to a head was I had a judge that finally intervened after my second DWI, and he just said, "You can't drink anymore." And he put me on house arrest for 3 months, where I had to do an alcohol. I had to blow into a breathalyzer at home. I had to do a voice identification on a device and do a breathalyzer.
Wow.
Lost my license for a year, lost jobs, everything. I was living with my grandmother.
How old were you at this point? Just
24 or 5.
okay. So it was legal to
mid-
drink, at least. You were just
Yeah. So basically for a decade of my youth, from about 14 to 25-ish, I was just gone. And I'm not kidding. Absolutely
Wow.
no any productive anything, just surviving and living from place to place, whatever. So I didn't even really look at life preparing to be an adult or anything. I had the programming of my youth. I had the black hole decade from being, a teenager to now being an adult, sober for the first time as an adult. And thank goodness about a month before I had met my wife, we started dating, and she's incredible. I mean, to go through that, to see me at the end of my illustrious crime and abuse career, chemical abuse,
she is
dependency career.
Incredible, and you do not deserve her. I'm just stating that for the record.
I don't.
So.
No, but she literally did. She empowered me and gave me the support I needed.
That's awesome.
And my grandmother too. I mean, because she let me stay there, and that was a big thing too that really motivated me. I saw the disappointment when I didn't come home for days because I was in jail, and I couldn't even call her because I was so ashamed, whatever. And I knew the end was there. But again, to kind of fast forward a little bit, I just kind of was in a pit of depression and just trying to come to grips with being an adult in a world that I had no way of functioning in. I had no way of comprehending most things like most other people would, because I literally just screwed off for a decade. And coming from my background, I mean, I had nothing to really build on. But I did know how to learn. I did know how to read. I just had never read books. I had never focused my learning abilities on anything since the Bible. So, in my early 30s, I started, the internet really became popular, and I took a course. I got my GED because I had dropped out of high school as a freshman. I didn't even make it any further than that, but I got my GED, went to the community college in this small unnamed Minnesota town. And I got some education, and, I started to realize that, I needed to do something. As the internet got more and more popular, I started picking up these little things about astronomy and about science, and I would just, I'd hear millions of years and stuff like that. And I would just laugh and, oh, it's so ridiculous. Millions of years, it seems so absurd to me. But I started seeing, better videos, and I don't even know exactly what seduced me into, it's probably just the YouTube, the black hole. You start clicking and next thing you know, but I did that and I kept doing it more and more. And I started thinking more and more. And I was talking to my mom a lot, and, she was remotely praying for me and, everything's going to be fine. I'm so proud of you for, God's helping you to get cleaned up and sober. You're finally going to, get stuff figured out. And so I just kept trying to just function and survive and live. And slowly but surely I started pulling myself together and functioning more as an adult. And, but the information started creeping into my head and it really started to bother me. And I started getting to the point where, well, the astronomy stuff, the Big Bang, I mean, that seems so ridiculous, but the more I learned, the more I watched, the more I began to grasp the concepts and see how they, used reason and rational processes to kind of come to these conclusions. And it wasn't just some jackass picking out an idea out of the sky and telling a story like I was accustomed to or told it was. It made sense. And I started talking to my mom saying, I think the earth is old. What if I'm put here? What if my calling in life is to go back and, kind of bridge this gap between Christians and non-Christians and the scientific whatever. I had this delusion of grandeur that I could somehow pull this together. So I dove in deeper with a determination of trying to bridge the gap and bring these facts together with faith somehow. And I did it telling my mother too that, I know it's the wrong thing to do. You're supposed to come to God and just submit yourself and lay prostrate and let him do his magic. But with my sobriety, I did it myself. The judge told me, he made me see the light, and I refused treatment and everything that I was court ordered to go to, and I fought it tooth and nail, and I was finally released from those obligations because I'm stubborn. And I said, I'll never drink again. And they said, you can't say you'll never drink again. And I said, I have to, because if I don't say I won't, I will. So that same...
Yeah, if you leave a loophole.
Right. And they say, AA, whatever, they say you can't do that. But I am that stubborn where that's how I operate. But I applied that stubbornness to attacking this problem in my spare time at home with a crappy computer, watching YouTube videos. It's pretty ridiculous looking at it in hindsight, but I got serious about it. I mean, it was like an important deal to me. It gave me something to kind of close my mind on and really focus on. But then I made the mistake of accidentally coming across the Christopher Hitchens video. And it absolutely kicked my ass. I mean, I had never heard anyone talk like that. He was so unapologetically just crushing pastor that, I was looking for, defense of faith, and atheism was something I'd never even really heard of. So when I started seeing these videos and I saw a couple whatever, but then I watched this 2-hour, it was Frank Turek and Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh my God. Mm-hmm. It literally blew my brain up. I thought for sure if you talked like Christopher Hitchens talked, a lightning bolt would literally pop through the clouds and smite you on the spot. And it didn't happen. And then I started watching more, and I was just consumed because he was so eloquent and he was so unapologetically, confrontational, calling out these things that I knew. He knew the Bible so well that it just absolutely knocked me off my chair because he's quoting scripture accurately. He's applying these lessons that I had held as a child as, being the paramount of morality and ethical behavior and everything you should strive to be. And he just examined it with an unapologetic, unblinking stare that was just like, holy shit, I didn't know you could do that. And it just blossomed. I watched every Christopher Hitchens video I could find. And then I ended up going, finding out about Dawkins and Harris, and that was right around the birth, or it actually had preceded that quite a bit, but it was still very fresh. The atheist movement was just exploding right then. But I even went to the library in this small unnamed Minnesota town. And
we're never going to know what this town is, listeners, just so you know.
No one will
I'm
know.
not telling you.
But I rented. They had the God Delusion at the library, and I went and checked out the God Delusion, and that was one of the more uncomfortable experiences of my life. I felt like I was, like a kid buying condoms for the first time, or someone buying tampons for their wife, or what. I mean, I felt like that, but just tenfold more. And the lady at the counter, I remember, she kind of looked at me. It's like I maybe was reading into it, but it seemed like she looked at me like, "Ooh, Jesus, you're bold." That book's been here for 13 years and hasn't even wiggled once. Everybody walks faster when they go past it.
They blow the dust off of it.
But I read it, and that was really the first I had read maybe one or two Clancy novels, but other than that, other than the Bible, I had literally read nothing. And I had to sit with a dictionary because of, the eloquence and the vocabulary of the likes of Hitch and Dawkins and Harris. I mean, it literally expanded my everything. I mean, I was learning as I was learning, and I just I had an insatiable appetite for more. And I was starting to understand what reasonable thought processes were and what logic was, and how there's, rules and parameters, and how you can know things objectively, and how to delineate between objective knowledge and subjective things, and what faith was versus, rational.
Critical thinking.
Right. And I mean, just all.
It's funny how that happens, that when you actually start using your brain, you reason your way out of faith.
Yeah. And you hear so many people say that now, that you can't be reasoned out of a position you're reasoned into. And I call bullshit. And maybe I'm unique in that way, but I think perhaps it's more just hearing someone make an argument in a way that you hadn't heard that actually cracks the shell, because I had that wall
most
up.
people don't reason their way into faith.
Right. Well, it's programmed as children for most everyone who's in that situation. It's just never, ever been questioned.
Yeah, you've probably heard it a bunch too, where people say, how could you have believed that? How could you possibly, or people are so stupid to have believed that? You don't have a choice.
No.
You never thought that there was any other way to think or believe.
Well, especially when
wet.
when your parents are telling you this too, like
exactly.
That's what the people that you believe and that you trust the most as a child are telling you how the world works. I mean,
right.
You believe them.
And all of your friends and everybody, most of your relatives, they can't all be wrong.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and I think that probably, being from because my dad wasn't a Christian. He claimed to be a Christian. He claimed to be converted, but the way he lived, I mean, it was such a stark contrast when I would visit my father. It was pretty infrequent, but I would get these glimpses of life outside my little bubble.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and I think that helped to kind of grease the wheels a little bit, because I knew people existed outside of that bubble. But I mean, I didn't eat pork until I was, 14, 15 years old. I'd never had caffeine, because that's part of, as a Mormon, hot
that's a gray area. That's a gray area for Mormons.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. No coffee, but Diet Coke's totally fine.
Okay.
Interesting.
It's the heat. It's the heat that gets you.
Yeah, but hot chocolate's okay. I really don't. I think it's caffeine or coffee and tea are forbidden.
But you can drink Diet Coke.
That or Monsters.
What?
Yeah, they're totally. I know, it's ridiculous.
Okay, that makes no sense.
They make their own wiggle room. They do what they want.
Yeah, so that is essentially though what happened, where things went, and I've just ever since I have been searching for more truth, and it's just interesting too how things just started to fall into place. I mean, my mental health stabilized. I had a lot of physiological, what I now am fairly confident that I had manifestations of stress related. I mean, just had this constant angst and uncertainty and fear and concern, and that stuff just melted away. Not to get too personal, but my wife and I mean, we always thought about having kids, and we never really said we weren't going to have kids. And we finally went off birth control and just said, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it never happened for years. So we were starting to think that maybe we had an issue with fertility, whatever. And we actually had a doctor tell us that. But it was right around that time where my deconversion happened that, shortly after that, I used to have migraines severely and canker sores and stomach issues really seriously. And when this all happened, we bought a house. I started a business. I got rid of all my physical ailments. We got pregnant. Got a beautiful 6.5-year-old little boy now everything changed for me. So it was a deconversion. It was an anti-conversion for me to just jettison that horse shit that was shackled around my neck for decades that almost killed me. Because I was brought to the pits of despair and I felt like I was such a failure and so far from God that there was no redemption, even though I knew the stories and I knew everything about it. But it just getting rid of that, being clear of that it saved my life. It changed everything.
That's good.
It cost me a relationship with my mother. And that's the dark side because we haven't spoken now for years. She's never even met her grandson. But the one time she did meet I should take that back. She came to our home shortly after my son was born. And it was the first time we'd been face to face since I had lost my faith. And she kind of knew it, and we danced around eggshells for a little bit, but it came to a head, and we got to the point where it came down kind of to an ultimatum. And I looked at her, and it was partially to kind of demonstrate to my wife, because she was raised in a Methodist household with very tolerant. She grew up reading Free to Be You and Me and all that. Very open, wonderful, liberal parents, wonderful people. So she couldn't comprehend where I came from, even though I told her and she had known me for so long. But when my mother came out, we had this just terrible evening of tiptoeing around the issues, and it finally just blew up. And long story short, again, it came down to, I had the Bible that she'd given me as a child, and I've got tons of literature that if I could show you in person right now, just pages and pages and pages of handwritten prophecies and scriptural messages. She's all in on faith.
Wow.
But she was sitting in my home, and I had the Bible. I was on my knees right in front of her going, I'm just afraid that with my lack of faith, if I had to have you choose between this book in my hand and me, you would choose this book. And without blinking, without batting an eyelash, she looked me right in the eyes and said, I would choose that book every single time.
Wow.
And
that's heartbreaking.
I just sat back on my heels, and I looked at her and stood up and turned around, and she went to her room, went to bed. The next morning she asked to be brought to my brother's, who lives in the community. And that was the last time we saw each other.
Wow.
So
your brother's still in?
He never was in, but he doesn't push it. He doesn't challenge it.
Okay.
So I just had the audacity to talk about it. And that's the thing. She tried for a long time to just pretend like we're still there and just not talk about it. But I can't do that.
Right. No, you can't.
No, especially with the background, the baggage, I had a lot of things that I needed resolved before we could move on.
It does a lot of damage to be raised in such a controlling environment.
Does. And like I said, I wasn't kidding when I said it almost killed me, because the depths of depression and...
Yeah.
And you've told me before, Justin, that, part of your kind of deconversion was your thoughts about having a child and being a father, and, what do I want to teach my child? And
how would you raise your child? What would you teach him? Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that
absolutely
private?
No, that's that. I smoked for 22 years, and I started when I was, 14 years old. And the month before my son died, or good Lord, my son was born. Jesus. It was the day my smoking habit died, though. And it was kind of a moment where I don't want him to know me like this. I don't want him to associate this stain on me. And it was kind of symbolic of, I hate to put that much on cigarettes, but I still have that pack of cigarettes in my garage up on a shelf where I see it every day. And it's part of the dedication
Wow.
I mean, because everybody said drinking, I would quit drinking probably 3 times over than to quit smoking. That was my last remaining crutch from my old life. But that was the level that I was thinking. I know how not to be a parent. That's what I learned through the processes that I grew up with. Not that my parents were terrible. They weren't abusive. They weren't any of that, but a level of neglect and the misinformation and the, I mean, when you program a kid with that kind of poison, I mean, if you accept it, I guess I've known enough people where it appears to enhance their life that I can't just say, you know, a blanket statement that religion, like Hitchens says, poisons everything, because I know a lot of people get community and whatever out of it, and I can't say they don't.
I think it does, though.
Well, I do too.
In the long run, it does. I think it does way more damage to the kids. They're happy in the moment, and they have their friends and the community, but they become the adults that question everything.
Right. Well, at least to the level of like my wife is a perfect example. She was raised about as church-oriented as you could possibly be raised. I mean, almost every one of her memories of a child was some youth group outing or church function. I mean, that is the core of her parents, is their church. And it always has been from her memory. And I see that, and it caused me to second guess. That was another thing that kind of cracked these people are practicing the wrong faith. As I knew it, and I can still to this day, I could nail them down with scripture and make them look a fool because they're not following to the letter the Bible, but they're wonderful, happy, healthy, balanced people who raise, you know, wonderful families and the connections they have in the community on every level. They're just excellent human beings, and they're practicing the wrong faith that I knew didn't hold up. And so that, again, that dissonance that just kind of forced me to, and that goes to my parenting too, the lessons, you know, I need to lead by example. And part of that too is just being honest and open. I was so isolated that, you know, living in the goddamn woods, doing nothing but 24/7 reflecting on matters of faith. I mean, it is caustic to the success of a human. It just will not work. So when we became parents, I mean, that's everything. Kind of, I don't want to make it sound robotic, but I want to give him the tools to succeed and make decisions based on good information, you know, with tools that are demonstrably better and better suited for success in the world, not just personal success, but success as a human, to contribute, you know, to hopefully leave the world a little better place than when he got there.
And just to be a good person in general. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because sometimes Christians are judgy. I don't know if you noticed.
No, really?
It comes across, I've noticed every now and then.
Okay. It's not a regular thing.
No, that's why people say you're acting so Christian, because you're kind.
I see. That makes sense.
At least they don't push it on you, though.
No. You usually don't know who the Christians are because they're very humble about it and kind and generous.
And they don't talk about it. They don't talk about their... They keep it very private. They pray in
secret. Yeah. It's a private thing. Fight Club. And exactly. And they do their service, you know, in the shadows. Mm-hmm. I can't explain. I mean, you guys know. You guys know. You get it. You get it.
So we are at about the 45-minute mark. So do you want to tell your story, Amy, or should we make that its own episode, or what do you want to do?
Nah, I'm not that interesting.
You can do it pretty quick. Okay.
Slide over and grab this koala.
All right.
I don't know. I have a snake too. So I don't know. I don't know.
Where's my goddamn tiger?
Animals. I don't know.
Once we get enough Patreon
for more Patreon money,
yeah.
Hello, bring us. Yeah, no, I don't know. So I was raised.
What's your deal?
Mormon.
Tell us your deal.
Oh, I have so many deals. How much time do no? So I was raised Mormon, and I was, from an early age, I was told that the natural man is evil. So my initial like automatic thoughts are wrong first. So I have to correct myself and always be cognizant of how I'm thinking, what I'm thinking about. We memorized articles of faith and scriptures, and the Mormons have 4 books of scripture. And so we had to know things from all of them, but we cherry pick things in a way that it's comprehensive and it makes sense. But if you actually read the Bible from front to back, it's less so. I never did that. I'm not saying, I don't recommend it to anyone, but, it's basically, I was told I was wrong, like bad and wrong. And, the suffering speaks to me also, because we were, when someone is going through a hard time, it's, such a faith affirming time. That's when you build your faith. And because I was female, I was told probably from about the time I was 11 or 12, I started being told that my only purpose in life is to get married and have babies. That's my sole purpose in life.
And wait, is that not your sole purpose in life?
So far. And this podcast now. Well, thank you for saving me.
You're welcome.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you.
Sure you are.
Don't judge me.
No, we're just going to cut him out of the show. Yeah. It's okay. So, yeah, from a time I was in this group called Young Women's, and you start learning that you're supposed to get married, and you have to marry the right person. It's someone who went on a mission, preferably an Eagle Scout, because the Mormons were all up in the scouting program back in the day. Now they're not as much. But yeah, you have to marry an Eagle Scout who was a Mormon missionary, who's a return missionary, someone who returned with honor, not someone who came home early because he, did bad things, and get married super young. By the time you're 21 or so, you're an old maid. 21, 22. So get married early and then start having babies as soon as possible, and have as many babies as your body can handle.
Wow.
Yuck.
That's pretty much. And then they say, you can get a degree, but only if something happens to your husband, so you have a career to fall back on.
Ugh.
There's never been a focus on working yourself, learning job skills, basically anything like that. And I was a very good Mormon girl. I towed the line all through high school. I was the leader of all of my youth groups. I lived in an area, I grew up in an area that was predominantly Southern Baptist and Catholic. And so the Mormon group was really small, and I stuck to my little tight-knit community, and I went to the Wednesday night activities. I went to Sunday church. I went to early morning seminary classes, which were at 6 a.m, and I was the driver to all of my friends. So I actually got up at 5 o'clock to drive from house to house and pick up everybody and meet at the church by 6 a.m. And it went from 6 to 7. And then I had time to run home, change into my school clothes, because I wore pajamas to that, and go to school every single morning all through high school. So when you graduate high school, you also graduate seminary. And it's 4 years. And so 1 year is dedicated to one of the books of scripture.
Ugh.
And so and then every summer there's girls camp, which is a week. And it's just inclusive. It's all inclusive. All your friends are Mormon. All of your activities are Mormon. All of your entire life.
Very insular.
Is insular. That's a good word. Yeah, that's it was very. That was the people I hung out with. Even though I went to a school that was predominantly other religions, I had friends that were other religions and other faiths. But my closest friends were Mormon, because
one of us.
They weren't
one of us.
Yeah, basically. And so that was I was a really good Mormon girl. I didn't date boys. I didn't I didn't do anything. And then I got married to someone I had known for about 3 months.
Whoa.
I met him in April. We were married by October.
Yikes.
So 6 months. But he proposed to me on like 4 weeks in, something like that. And then we just were planning the wedding the rest of the time. And so that was when I was 19. I was 19 years old. And then we moved a couple times and we tried really hard to stay Mormon or stay good, because I was thinking the same thing you were, that how was I going to raise my children? I wanted to raise them in the church, because how else could you possibly raise your kids?
That's the only way.
Yeah, I couldn't think of any other way. And I didn't even know what to do with myself outside of the church. So I had my first baby at 23, my second one at 25, and my third one at 30. Don't do math. But I have 3 children. And so we would go through bursts of doubling down and completely faithful and full tithe payers and going to the temple and, all of the things you're supposed to do. And then we'd go through periods of inactivity, because life is hard, especially when you have 2 small children, that are, I think they're like 26 months apart or something like that. So I was exhausted for, I think it's been about 17 years I've been exhausted.
Were you in Texas this whole time?
No, we moved around.
Okay.
We lived by family. But we were in Texas, and then we were out of state, and then we're back in Texas. But we always kind of came back to the church and came back. And then by the time I had my daughter, I was pretty faithful again. And over the years, I was just probably right before my daughter was born, I decided to go back to school. And, I prayed about it, and I talked to my husband about it, and I talked to my dad about it, because you have to, check in with the patriarch of the family, just to kind of make sure. And everybody agreed that it was a good idea to have some skills in case anything happened to my husband. Because I had had children so young, and I got married so early that I never really finished my education. So I went back to school around 28-ish, and then I had my daughter at 30, and it didn't stop. I kept going to school, and everybody was like, wow, that's, some dedication. I'm like, that's actually pretty standard to not quit school just because you have a baby.
Yeah.
But I kept going and going and going, and I would hear things and learn things, and I was kind of like, well, I became more of a liberal Mormon. Like, maybe I'm a Mormon that believes in evolution, and maybe I'm a Mormon that believes that, women are people. Well, I always did that. We had that episode. Yeah. But maybe I'm a Mormon that believes that the world is older than 6,000 years old. And, maybe I just kind of like expanded things. And what they say in the ex-Mormon community is you put that up on your shelf. Like you have a question, you're like, oh, this will be answered. God, I can ask God this question later. This will be something that's answered in the end. You kind of write it down or put it in a book or close it, and you set it up on your shelf. You just put it away. You're like, I'm not going to think about that. And you consciously kind of put it up on yourself, or put a wall in front of it. Something, you shut it down.
That's a good trick.
Yeah. But eventually, if there's enough weight on a shelf, it collapses, which people call it in the ex-Mormon community. They say, my shelf broke, or the issue that broke my shelf. And then it's just all the questions come flooding out. Like, but what about this? What about this? But Noah's Ark, that had to have happened, right? No, nothing. No. Moses was real though, right? No. Like, you start going through all of those little questions that you had that you just kind of, I'm not going to think about that right now. Because there's a saying in the Mormon church, ask God, not Google.
Oh, wow.
Which
clever.
Basically
I didn't get the memo on that one.
Don't think for yourself. Just, we'll just tell you what to believe and what to think. Yeah. So
is that considered a Jack Mormon? Someone who's like dipping a toe on the outside?
No, a Jack Mormon is someone who drinks and smokes, but still goes every Sunday and acts faithful. I was not someone, I never did anything. I was still even when we were inactive, I was still following all the rules. Like, I still would have been considered very Mormon. Like, I was just I didn't swear. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't drink tea.
Can I ask the obvious question? Did you wear the magic underwear?
Okay, sometimes because they're really uncomfortable, and I live in Texas, which is 1,000,000 degrees most of the year. And actually, I went to a bishop who is the pastor of the congregation, and I talked to him about it because I'm very short and they're super long on me, and I asked if I could hem them, and he actually said, you can't alter them because I guess it takes away the magic, or I don't know, but he told me I couldn't hem them. And I said, well, then I'm not going to wear them. And he said, that's between you and God. I was like, cool, God and I are good. So I didn't wear them.
He said it was fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I was like, well, God's my bro. So yeah, we're good.
Wow.
And so that was when we lived out of state, when I had my first child. And so I didn't wear them for probably a good 10 years. The last 10 years I was Mormon. And I did it unashamedly. I think that's how you say it. Just people would ask me about it. I would just look them in the eye and be like, God and I are good. Like, bring it, bro.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness you were surrounded by non-judgmental Christian types.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is they didn't know what to do with me because I was the same person that I am now in the Mormon church. Like I'm someone who's fairly outspoken. I look someone right in the eye and basically say, fight me, bitch.
But with a nicer
they didn't know what
word
to do with me. Fight me, my lady. I don't know. But like I would wear low cut dresses and like no one knew what to do with me. Like someone would ask a question, I would give a smart ass answer, and I never quite fit in. I never had, as an adult, I didn't have very many friends that were Mormon because they're all meek and mild women that talk about recipes and shoes. And I was interested in science and education. And I was teaching my kids, they were teaching them, don't touch yourself because it's dirty. I was teaching them, just wash your hands, please, for the love of God, just wash your goddamn hands. Yeah. So they didn't know I still have friends that are Mormons that are, local and from other places because they liked me, but they didn't know what to do with me. Like they didn't know what category, like she's not super religious and pious and spiritual. Like we're not going to ask her to give a speech. We might ask her to teach a class on something because she's organized, but we don't really know. Like they didn't know where to put me. Basically. So
how long have you, I guess, been away from the church now?
I'm a baby atheist. I've only been away for about 4 years.
Just a baby.
I know. So, okay. So I went back to school and I was taking, all of your core classes that you've got to take in order to get those degrees. And they all kind of chipped away at my faith, but I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that there was damage being done. I thought that, I'm doing this great thing. I'm a Mormon, I'm a mom, and I'm in school, and I'm doing all these things, and it's, yay, go me.
That's how the devil
and
gets
then, it did. It destroyed my family. So, basically, I went into a humanities class, which was my favorite class because I loved the professor. Like she and I actually became friends, and we've had lunch a couple times, and we email one another every now and then, and so I walked into this humanities class. Wait, let me rewind a little bit. Like a week or two before the class, I had watched a documentary on marketing and Coca-Cola. So let me rewind to that. So I watched this documentary, and I promise I'll tie it together.
Sure you will.
I promise.
Yeah, I'll hold my breath.
Because Coke is delicious. Yeah. End of story. No, I'm just kidding. So but they were talking about marketing. It was one of those, it was like a Nova or something. And it was talking about marketing and how Coca-Cola is the most recognizable brand in the world. Like you can go to the smallest, most remote African village and they have cans of Coke because they have local distribution where it's, they build the factories everywhere. So it's local distribution. So they're not all coming from, Dallas, Texas, or wherever the Coca-Cola plants are. So that was in the back of my mind. So I walked into this humanities class and we were talking about something very innocuous. It was, the Fertile Crescent and the early humans and how they were nomadic and then they kind of spread everywhere. And it just kind of, I was just thinking it just kind of broke that shelf and that wall that I'd built around that questions in my head, that the world is older than I can possibly comprehend. There's more humans than I can wrap my brain around. And why the fuck does Coca-Cola have better distribution than God? Seriously, because the only true church was given to a 14-year-old white boy in upstate New York. That doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't it be distributed equally so everybody had access to it in those times? Because there was no way to distribute it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of in the back of my mind. I was like, why would Coca-Cola have better marketing strategies? So I just started, like, I sat in that class and I was just writing down all these questions. I wasn't listening to the teacher anymore. I wrote down question after question after question after question after question. And it was a once a week class. So it was actually I think it was a 2.5 hour class. I think we had a little break. We took our break. We came back and I just kept doing it, writing my questions after question after question. And I came home and I didn't say a thing to my husband. I was silent about it. For weeks, I was just quiet about it. But I believe now when I think back to it, I walked in that class, devout Mormon, and I was mostly an atheist by the time I walked out. It was probably a 2-hour conversion because I just kept thinking about all of those questions. And about a month later or so, I sat down with my husband one night and I was like, I don't think I believe in the church anymore. And I was so scared because that's a deal breaker. Because that was, we were Mormon when we met. We were devout and it's terrifying. And he was like, okay. And I was like, and I'm not sure how I feel about Jesus either.
Oh, man.
And he was like, yeah, I laid it all out because, and he was like, okay. And I had been listening to podcasts a lot of ex-Mormon podcasts during that time. And I was like, I know this is really hard to wrap your brain around. I was reading blogs and he was like, you really have to be careful about the sources because that's another thing that very religious people take is, the intention of the people writing source material or, is God in their hearts or are they just trying to destroy the church? And so he's like, you need to be really careful about the sources. You need to be really careful about, where you're getting your information from. And so I went to the Mormon website and they have the truth buried. It's deep, but it's there. Like the stones in the hat, the young wives and, everything, all the damning evidence, it's there. It's just hidden. And so in all of the ex-Mormon communities, I started to find the links to them because you can't get to them. It takes a long time to get to them yourself. So I'd find the link and I would send it to him, or I'd find the link and I'd send it to my dad. Just slip it in there. Yeah. So I would, and then I started listening to these podcasts and he was like, well, I don't really believe it. I'm just listen. And then we can talk about it. And he started listening and he went to church with the kids for I left the church in November and he went until April. And then we pretended to keep going to church until about June. Like every Sunday I would be like, oh no, my kids have a fever. Can't go to church. So on Facebook, I look faithful still. Yeah, that was about 4 years ago. November to this November was about 4 years ago. So yeah, so that's, and it was the opposite of Justin's feelings. Cause then I had the crushing despair of what am I supposed to do with my life now? Because my entire purpose was to be a Mormon wife and mother. And who am I? Like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know anything. And then if you make a decision, you don't even know if that's the right one.
I don't have a book to tell me what to do.
No one's here to tell me who I am and what to do. And basically my entire life was mapped out for me. And I went off trail and threw away the map. Like, I don't know. So I have to discover who I actually am as a human, which is terrifying because, what if I'm secretly a monster?
Yeah.
And
not so secretly. Yeah. It's fine.
Shut your dirty whore mouth. Milady.
Yeah, thank you.
I said with all due respect.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I said, please shut your dirty whore mouth. No, so it took about 6 to 8 months of listening to podcasts obsessively, reading everything I could get my hands on, and just convincing myself that I didn't make a horrible, horrible mistake that was damning my family line for generations to come. Because that's what I honestly felt was, what am I doing? Like, I'm making this decision that's changing the course of my children's lives, their children, like all the way down. It's terrifying. It was terrifying. So it was a lot. And my parents, there's a lot of heavy sighing when they talk to me on the phone. Well, there's less now. I don't sugarcoat things. But I'm not confrontational about it. But if they ask me direct questions, which they stopped doing because I answer them. Like my dad used to call and he was like, well, what about this? I'm like, oh, glad you asked. And I would just go off and he was like, oh, well, I think you're taking it out of context. I'm like, oh, you know what? Let me send you the article. Let me link it to you. It's fine. I got this. So they stopped asking questions and now they just call and say, I mean, we love you. And, there's just that heavy sigh. And then there's some passive aggression because that's Mormon's first language.
Yeah, you'd fit right in up in Minnesota.
I know. I mean, if that's the way you want to be, that's how you want to live your life. So that's, my mom actually visited the week before Christmas, and Mormons don't drink; they're teetotalers. And I was having a very painful biopsy like the week she was there, and she was actually there to help me with the kids and stuff while I was going through that. And I grabbed a bottle of wine, and I turned and looked at her because she was at the store with me, and I was like, I'm going to need 2 to deal with this week with you. And I grabbed a second bottle right in front of her. And she was like, she laughed. She was like, that's not funny. I mean, I'm like, it's hilarious, actually. I didn't drink the second bottle, but I thought it was really funny to buy it in front of her.
It was worth it just for that.
So
humor.
Anything for the jokes. So yeah, that's pretty much
you.
That's pretty much me.
My story's totally lame. I grew up Lutheran. It was boring. I believed, but not that hard. And then when I was in college, I mostly quit believing. So that's about it. I don't really have an interesting background, spiritually wise. I
actually attribute my deconversion to Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Oh, sponsor. Send me free Coca-Cola.
Idea. I think they're too busy sponsoring Donald Trump and getting his Diet Coke needs met.
I actually don't drink Coca-Cola because, I live in Texas and we're required to drink Dr.
I used to do Coke. Does that count?
I think so. I actually think so. I would imagine.
TMI. I'm sorry.
We're going to put that on a t-shirt. So just so you know that.
Well,
Well, thank you so much, Justin, for coming on. And
thanks for coming on. And we actually let him talk.
We were nice.
I appreciate.
Yes. What is wrong with you? Are you sick?
I think so.
Are you ill tonight?
I'm tired.
I'm actually exhausted. Yeah. I had a long day.
I just had a day right now.
So
yeah, it's something's going on.
I was when I left work today, I was in the process of taking a 5-gallon bucket and writing the words "fuck it" bucket on it. Ooh. Because I'm going to start selling profanity in my shop. So that's what I did with my day was write dirty things on buckets.
She made an adult section.
I did. It's going to be so much fun. Oh my God. Okay, so we should wrap up this episode.
So you added the adult section in the back.
I did, and I've got all kinds of... I also made a nice little planter that says, try not to fucking kill me, because for people like me who can't keep plants alive...
I can't keep
plants alive I thought it would be
either.
funny.
My mom bought me a plant when she was visiting, and I was like, what are you doing?
See, you need my... Please try not to fucking kill me planter. It would be great. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Send it to me. Just mail it to me.
We'll see. I don't know. If I get ambitious.
Where's my bowl?
Yeah, it's sitting on my desk and I'm just too lazy to mail it. Okay. I did it. It's the thought that counts.
It is.
Speaking of bowls, so I have been personalizing some wonderful soup bowls that will eventually be Patreon gifts for our wonderful Patreon donors.
We have some
and we haven't named them yet. So we thought now might be a good time to give them a little bit of love because they're giving us money for just talking into a microphone, which is...
In the Mormon church, you're given a secret name in the temple.
What's yours?
So should we give them secret names too, or just their Patreon names?
Since you're not in that club anymore, what was your secret name?
Yeah, what was yours?
Martha.
Seriously?
What? Did you like it? No,
No.
it's kind of a dumb name.
At least I can remember it. Some of them are like Ezekiel
Oh my
and
gosh.
Hezekiah.
Elohim, or yeah, it's like biblical names, and which is amazing that they're all like, yeah, exactly.
That's a bad one. You don't want that one.
I was married to Amulet.
Wow.
So
cool.
that's weird. Yeah,
I was just called Hey You as a kid. So okay, let's look back on track here, Amy. Quit distracting me.
I was called Hurry Up.
Okay, so we have got so our newest patron is Satan's Swampy Asshole. You may have heard of him. He is notorious on the podcasting circuit for giving people the monies. I found out
And we appreciate it.
I found out today
so
who he
much.
is for reals, and I'm not going to tell you guys. But you know what?
Nope, we're not going to tell
Satan
you.
Swampy Asshole, we love you. You are our almost number one fan. You'll have to fight it out amongst the others for it. But he pledged at the lobster bisque level, which is the highest level of support.
What?
So we've also got Ashley. I am not going to read last names if I don't know you personally, just because people may not want to be associated with this show.
I wouldn't.
So-
I don't.
or with us as people.
No, I don't blame
So
you guys.
yes, we have a wonderful Ashley.
Use fake names. You don't want to be associated
No.
with us.
Ashley, you're the fucking bomb. Thank you. Lobster bisque level. You are great. Nathan.
Thank you.
Nathan Dickey, whose last name I will say because he is starting his own podcast and
He is. I'm going to be
And
on
Amy's
it on
gonna be
Saturday.
on it.
I don't know when it'll
talking
come out.
about magic
I'm not sure when
underwear.
it'll come out, but I'm recording on Saturday.
Yes.
I'm not talking about my underwear.
right.
I mean,
Your
probably
Mormon
briefly.
underwear. She's going to be answering all those Mormon questions you wanted to know.
They're black. Oh, not right now.
So
Okay,
Nathan, you are also awesome. And he was
Thank
you,
you,
our
sir.
first patron, so I also made him a
He
soup
was.
bowl. So his is also sitting on my desk, waiting till I get around to mailing it.
Yeah, good luck getting that, Nathan.
Then
Still
we've
waiting
got
for
one
mine.
barely worth mentioning. The Podunk Polymath podcast has pledged, but
Chris.
I'm audibly rolling my eyes right now. Whatever, Chris. We'll send your
Thanks for the money, but you're the worst.
You're terrible. You should feel bad about yourself because you're a white man. So
And we love you because we are self-haters.
exactly. And Henry, Mysterious Henry, we appreciate your support as well.
Thank you for being better than Chris.
Yes, at least.
And Cogdis. Holy shit, we haven't made fun of them.
God. Well, they don't give as much love to their patrons as we do. They just read them off quickly and it's dumb. So I'll throw that in.
Yeah, that's true.
And our final patron that we have
we
so
win.
far is the By Any Means podcast, which you should definitely go listen to because they are pledging to us. Yeah.
Which means they're
Which
good.
means they're the best podcast on the air because the Podunk
Second best.
Polymath is definitely not the best. So it probably goes Secular Soup and then By Any Means podcast.
And then everybody else. And then way down to the bottom, Cogdis.
And then under that is the Podunk Polymath. So
Oh, poor Chris.
I'm sorry, Chris. We have so much fun with you.
She's not sorry. Don't listen to her.
Don't
She's a
hate
bitch.
us.
Don't
Keep sending us money, please. We love you.
Oh, make more live videos while you make fun of us. Those are the best.
I can't
They are
I
so
cannot
funny.
wait until we start getting hate mail, like the legit, you're a slut, I hate you, bitch, hate mail, so that I can read it on air.
Yes.
That's gonna be awesome.
Yes.
So
We're like, look how big his signature is. You know what that's compensating for?
So if you
Small hand. I
if
don't
you would
know.
like to send us
Tiny pen.
gifts of money so that we can keep talking into microphones for no apparent reason with no experience whatsoever, you can go to Patreon.
I thought you said that we had degrees in this last time.
Oh yeah, we do. I forgot. Sorry.
I was lied to.
We do. Yeah.
Okay.
No, we went to
Thank
we
you.
went to
Thank you.
podcasting school. I just blocked it out.
Yeah.
Patreon.
I went
I
to
have a
the
BS degree in
Harvard of
podcasting.
podcasting.
Yes, definitely.
I actually do have not a BS.
Well, that's bullshit.
So punny. I forgot to tell you, Justin's all about the puns.
I have refrained this whole time. Not
I'm
one pun.
amazed. How did you do it?
I
Yeah.
have a cork strategically placed somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He's got some sort of genetic pun
Oh,
problem.
Jesus, there it went. This place is a mess.
Good one.
Oh God. Okay. Please send
Okay.
us money.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, give him some money. Come on.
Yeah, Justin. Tell them to give us some money.
Especially if you're a dude. I'm
Seriously.
gonna make a plea for the guys to contribute because
Yeah, they don't listen to women, so you need to talk
your
to
voice
women.
sounds twice as
the least you
commanding.
can do to make up for your maleness is fork over
Thank
some
you.
cash. It'll absolve you.
It's
In
quite
fact,
literally the least you can
They
do.
can do some
It's working towards it.
hail Amy's afterwards too and make you clean as a whistle.
Oh, yeah.
Good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Record yourself doing that, please. Send it to the email. It might show up on Facebook.
Make sure you
So,
get the
yeah.
right one.
I promised Amy with an I that I would write an outro for next week because we don't have one and we just
She didn't
ramble.
yeah, we don't have an outro.
I was too busy making
So,
a fuck
yeah.
it bucket. So, Amy, you go ahead.
I started school this week, so I've been doing homework.
I'll let you outro us.
Let's see.
Fuck
I
it.
know. I'm never done. Okay, so thank you, Justin, for being on the show
My pleasure.
and
Thank you for
sharing your
having
story
me.
with our legions of fans. You're welcome. And you can find us. So how can they find us? Where can they find us? We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on Patreon. That's the most important one.
You can
Obviously.
email us.
Just
Gmail
yes, at Secular Soup
podcast at gmail.com.
at gmail.com.
You can find us on Facebook.
and
Just
Secular Soup or Secular Soup podcast.
we established this last time. We were both right, Amy. It's fine. Let it go.
I know. Just Google or just look at both of them. We're on Instagram at Secular Soup.
All I'm saying is we live in
And
the age of Google.
You can
It's not
find us
hard to
anywhere
figure
you
it
can
out.
find
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
Just
don't
just
be
find
dumbasses.
us. Come on.
I mean, I love you guys.
No, you're the best.
So
Send
yeah,
us money.
We're on all places podcasts exist, including SoundCloud, which we said we weren't on last week, but we actually
Yes,
are.
thank you to our wonderful producer
So-
Marissa for informing us that we are actually
Yeah.
on the SoundCloud.
We are actually on SoundCloud. So yeah, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, we're in all the places. And Spreaker and yeah. So there we go.
Okay.
This is our unprepared outro.
All right. Well, we will leave you with the dulcet tones of the wonderful Mr. Eli Bosnick.
Secular soup creed. Soup is the ultimate virtue. It's delicious, nutritious, patriarchy smashing, racism fighting, warm and fuzzy, human affirming, fun having, anti-theist, glitter throwing, tummy satisfying, pair of new shoes fulfilling, diversity seeking, happiness. Minestrone, beef and barley, chicken broth and split pea, gazpacho, tomato, clam chowder and potato, chicken noodle, beef noodle, egg drop and ramen cup, miso, gumbo, leek and pho. Grab a bowl and taste the magic. Slurp even this.